Hello there and welcome to episode 10 of the Or So She Says podcast. Oh my god, made it to double digits, finally. And I am not going to lie, I actually have a podcast booked in for 2 weeks time, and I actually was like, oh, that'll probably be the next podcast I do. But actually, I got a wave of inspiration today, and I've had so many questions on this topic recently. I was just like, you know what, let's do a podcast. So for anyone new here, my name is Narissa Shea and I am an online coach. I am a personal trainer, nutritionist, sport and exercise psychology consultant, a yoga instructor and a professional Irish dancer. So today I'm going to be talking all things periods, all things menstrual cycle, and actually more importantly, how you can tailor your nutrition and training to work with your cycle as opposed to against it. So before jumping in with this episode, a little bit of a plug here. We are hosting our first in-person event in October in Dublin. It'll be on the 7th of October and it is going to be a full day event. I'm actually so excited for it. So nervous, but so excited for it. And I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who has purchased the ticket already. The pre-sale tickets are still available. You can actually book them through the link in my bio or just drop me a message and I can send you the link. There are still a couple of pre-sale tickets left. And yeah, it's going to be awesome. I'm really, really excited for it. It's going to be a full day. We're going to be doing women's circle. We're going to be doing a workshop on like manifestation and journaling, and we're going to have some meditations. We're going to have like a restorative yoga class, and we're also going to be having some really cool talks at it. We're going to be having talks on nutrition and gut health. We're also going to be talking all things training, the importance of resistance training for women of all ages, and how we need to start approaching training and exercise from a place of love for our bodies as opposed to hate. I know a lot of us grew up in the era where we were literally seeing exercise as punishment. So that shift towards doing things for ourselves because we love ourselves and not because we hate ourselves. So I'm really looking forward to that talk. And lastly, my talk. Surprise, surprise, Narissa is doing a talk on mindset. Shock, horror, I know, mental. It's actually going to be my first public speaking engagement, so I'm really nervous about it, but I'm actually really excited. When I first launched this, everyone was messaging me and they were like, oh, so are you doing a yoga class, or are you doing a fitness class, or what are you doing? I was like, I'm actually giving a talk, and they were like, whoa. And it's funny because I had like motivational speaking as a goal on my vision board at the start of this year, and I had no idea how it was going to manifest, and I was like, hey, do you know what would be a great idea if you just host an event and talk at that, and then you get it out of the way, you've done your first public speaking engagement. And actually just a little segue here, because I've been bet into listening to David Goggins lately. I was so on the fence about whether to host this event because I'm essentially hosting the event, paying for everything. So if the thing goes tits up and goes to shit, I'm losing pretty much everything I've saved this year. And I was so on the fence as to whether to bite the bullet and do this. And I was listening to David Goggins' audiobook, and he talks about how when he was going to launch his first book, that he was getting offers from publishers, but the money wasn't great. And he was like, I know this book is worth more than this. So he ended up investing all of his money that he saved when he was in the army, his whole life savings, into self-publishing a book. Now, to do that for your first book is pretty fucking ballsy. And he was like, if that went tits up, I would have just lost everything. But he was like, I had to take a chance on myself. So I was like in the throes of whether to host this event, and I was like, oh my God, if it goes to shit, I'm just going to lose all my savings. And then I listened to this, and it was like the universe giving me that little push to be like, just fucking do it. What's the worst that can happen? You lose out on a bit of money. So what? Money can always be made back. That's the way I like to think about it as well. So yeah, that's where I came to the conclusion, right, I'm going to host my first event, and hopefully it'll be the first of many. So the name of the event came to me in a meditation, and it's actually a program I'm going to be fully launching next year. It's called Empowered Mind, Strong Body, Powerful Soul. So it's taking that holistic view towards improving our lives instead of just looking at things like training separately, nutrition separately, and then mindset separately. Like, you need to encompass all of these things in order to make lifestyle changes that are actually going to stick. So with that in mind, last thing I'm going to say on this is, if you would like to purchase a ticket or you want more information about the event, please drop me a message. You can find me on Instagram. It's Narissa_Shea Fitness. Or alternatively, you can purchase it from the link in my bio if you want to get the pre-sale ticket. So with that in mind, let's get stuck into periods. So this is a hot topic these days among the fitness and wellness space, with literally every fucking Tom, Dick and Harry jumping on the bandwagon of trying to sell you this diet or that diet and telling you that doing X is going to help you with Y, and you need this to balance your hormones, and you need this, and you can't train fasted, and like, there's so much scaremongering out there from people trying to push their agenda on you and on everyone. But I always say to people, if someone is pushing an agenda on you that says something is right and everything else is wrong, fucking question it, because most of the time they are making money off selling that to you, okay? Especially when it comes to diet plans, and you'll see this a lot among like the keto warriors, like it's their way or the highway and there's no way in between. And I'm like, that doesn't work for everyone. So even with my coaching, it's why I take a person-centered approach, because what works for one of my clients isn't going to work for the other client. And this is why I don't do meal plans. Why would I tell someone what to eat for whatever amount of weeks they're working with me or months they're working with me? What do they learn from that? They need to learn how to incorporate the foods they like into their diet so that this becomes a lifestyle change. And like, the truth of it is, every single person on this planet is different. And when it comes to women and their menstrual cycles, that is no different. So this podcast is going to be broken up into two segments. The first segment, I am going to be talking about the phases of the menstrual cycle. There is 2 phases to the menstrual cycle. And then I'm actually going to delve into how you can potentially tailor your training and nutrition to work with your cycle as opposed to against it, because I can honestly say this is one of the most empowering things I ever did and implemented into my life, and it's why I really, really highly recommend my clients and stuff tracking their cycle and becoming a lot more in tune with their own bodies and their own cycles. So without further ado, here is the episode. Enjoy. If you like this episode, please give me a rating if you can, if you haven't already. Maybe share it with your friends. As someone who's a very small content creator, it's very hard to compete with bigger pages and stuff like that. So when people share my content and my podcast, like, you have no idea how much that helps people like me to get what I would consider an important word out. So without further ado, here it is, episode 10 of the Or So She Says podcast. The menstrual cycle, one of my favorite things to talk about. And training and nutrition in relation to your menstrual cycle. That is what this video is going to be about. Okay, firstly, if you want a 1-minute summarized version of what I'm going to talk about now, go to my highlights, go to gym hacks, and it is the first video there. And I will sum everything up I'm talking about in 1 minute. However, if you want an in-depth version, then I beg you to listen to this, because actually by studying this and then becoming more in tune with my body, it was probably one of the most empowering things I've ever done. And my only regret was that I didn't actually learn about this sooner, especially as my career as a dancer. When I think back of all the times that I could not understand why some weeks I was just absolutely exhausted and could not perform to the level that I was at the week before, and beating myself up constantly about it, this would have came in so handy. Okay, before I jump straight in, it is worth pointing out that this is not my area of expertise, as in this is not my qualification, okay? I am just someone who is very interested in this, and I am someone who has studied it. And when I am talking about anything today, I am talking about what the overarching research says, and also more so in relation to my own journey, okay? Because I am completely qualified to talk about that. If you want someone who is an expert in this field, I highly recommend you go and follow the Fit Clinic Dr. Michelle Hone. And if you want to have a listen, she was on my podcast recently and we had so much good chats. So we're going to jump in, and straight off the bat, I am going to tell you that we're going to talk about the average menstrual cycle, okay? Chances are a lot of what I'm talking about, you're going to be like, that is not me at all, okay? But when we talk about the research and we talk about things, we say the average menstrual cycle is about 28 days. So we're going to talk about Sally, because we love talking about Sally. I always talk about Sally whenever I'm talking about these videos. Sally down the road. So Sally has a menstrual cycle of 28 days. Now, does that mean your menstrual cycle is going to be 28 days? Maybe, maybe not. And if it's 28 days this month and it's 29 days the next month, that does not necessarily mean you have an irregular cycle, okay? There is a range, and within that range, if you are falling within that range each month, even if it's varying by a day or two, that does not mean you have an irregular cycle. And that was a massive eye-opener for me, because I thought in order for it to be regular, it had to be bang on 28 days or whatever it was each month. I think the range, Michelle said, is 26 days to 35. Anything outside of that range, double check that, but anything outside of that range is what we're talking about when we're talking about irregular cycles, okay? And if your cycle is really short or it's really long, this could be indicative of a couple of underlying factors as well. So it's important that you are aware of this, okay? The first thing I always say to my clients is track your cycle. Also, it's worth pointing out that what I am talking about today is a natural menstrual cycle. What I mean by that is you're not on hormonal contraception, okay? Because when I'm talking about the menstrual cycle, we're talking about ovulation, we're talking about actually having a period. That doesn't happen if you're on hormonal contraception. So what's something that people really need to get in their head is if you are on the pill, okay? I used to think this, oh, it's my period. It's not your period. It's a withdrawal bleed. And that is literally just because when you take that break week, you're stopping taking them hormones. But that is not a period, because in order to have the period, you have to have ovulated, and you're not ovulating on the pill. Well, if you're on the pill, you're trying not to get pregnant. So obviously we want to stop ovulation. So get that out of the way first. If you are on hormonal contraception, then what you are experiencing is a withdrawal bleed, not a period, right? That was the first eye opener for me. I was like, oh, whoa, okay. The next thing is, I highly recommend you tracking your cycle. And I say this to all my clients, like when they first start with me and I ask them in their check-in forms and I'm like, oh, what day of your cycle are you on? And they're like, oh, I'm due the 25th or I'm due the 23rd. I'm like, no. What day are you on, right? So when I say day of cycle, day one is always the first day of your bleed. So if I got my period on Monday, then I would be on day 3. Now, the reason why this is important and why you're better off tracking it in this way, as opposed to saying I'm due the 25th, I'm due whatever. If you are trying to not get pregnant or you are trying to get pregnant, when you are ovulating and what day it's on is actually really important, okay? So day of cycle is in relation to what day was the first day of your bleed. Now, you can absolutely track your cycle and be on hormonal contraception as well. And actually something I did when I was on hormonal contraception was I was tracking my symptoms throughout the month, because even though I wasn't going through a regular menstrual cycle, I was still experiencing a little bit of PMS and other factors, okay? So straight off the bat, track your period. Day 1 is the first day of your bleed. So we have 2 phases to the menstrual cycle. We have the follicular phase and we have the luteal phase, okay? In the follicular phase, if you have, say, a 28-day cycle like Sally down the road, okay, you are looking at from day 1, first day of your bleed, to approximately day 14, depending on when you ovulate, estrogen is rising, okay? Without getting too technical about the types of estrogen, right? I call this my fucking superhero phase, right? I feel amazing. As soon as the cramps and stuff subside, like I actually just feel great, right? Love this time of my cycle. During this phase of your cycle, you will probably, I'm not saying definitely because life factors come into play too, probably feel an increase in energy, an increase in strength, an increase in recovery, an increase in mood, and a decrease in appetite, okay? So I'll talk a little bit about how this comes into play if you're dieting and stuff later, but just know that they are the main things that usually people will experience during this phase of their cycle from day 1 to approximately day 14, usually peaking around ovulation time. And that is usually where, if you're someone who's doing a lot of strength training, you will probably notice you start smashing a lot of PBs and stuff around this time. Right, then ovulation occurs. Okay, now that's not to say that if you have a 28-day cycle, it definitely happened on day 14. Just take, for example, Sally, we're saying it happened around day 14. Does that mean it's going to be on day 14 every month? No. That's another thing to be aware of if you're trying to get pregnant or not trying to get pregnant. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fall on the same day every month, okay? So then we come up to ovulation time. You'll probably notice around this time some people experience some cramps and stuff like that. Some people don't. I personally do. I get quite bloated and I actually get like pains in my ovaries around the time of ovulation. So I know roughly when I'm ovulating because I get that, okay? That doesn't mean everyone does, okay? But I do. And I'm not on any contraception or anything, okay? Right? So when I'm talking about my own menstrual cycle, it's just a natural cycle, okay? So around that time, you probably notice like actually an increased sex drive. All of these things that evolution has predisposed. They're like, you're really fucking fertile now. Go have sex because you should have a baby, right? That's what I'm talking about. That you'll probably notice all this around ovulation time, right? Then ovulation happens and we enter the luteal phase, which I call the, like Michelle says it, she's like, this is more like your Netflix and chill phase, okay? So what happens after ovulation is estrogen dips and we have a rise in progesterone. So when progesterone rises, you may, I'm not saying definitely, you may notice that you have an increased appetite, a decrease in strength, a decrease in recovery, a decrease in mood, potentially, and also you might just feel like a lot more tired, okay? Overall, just a bit more tired. Right, so I want to talk a little bit about the increase in appetite because people think they have to be able to diet consistently for 4 weeks of the month. And some of my clients can. They can stick to their calorie deficit that they had at the start of the month. But a lot of people, when they get really, really hungry just before their period, what they don't realize is after ovulation, what happens is your basal temperature increases, right? So your body temperature increases. When this temperature increases, you are actually burning more calories even at rest. Now, it's not a massive amount and it doesn't actually equate to the amount of fucking chocolate you want to eat before your period, but it could be the guts of it an extra 200 calories, okay? And it's important to realize that because that increased appetite that people get really frustrated with, there's a reason for it. It's usually because you're actually burning more calories at rest, so you're using more energy. So it makes sense. Now, there are ways to support these cravings and stuff like that you're not absolutely doing the dog in it every month and negating all of the hard work you did in the first 2 weeks. But equally, it's important to understand and recognize that this is happening in the latter half of your cycle. So I have 2 days in my month that I call my stabby days. Now, without getting too technical at the exact dates that these are, right? And even though it's progesterone that we're dealing with in the luteal phase, there's also a couple of other factors at play where there's quite a dip in other things. Anyway, I call them my fucking stabby days and I'm just so irritable these 2 days, right? Now, just because I know why they're happening doesn't get rid of the fact that they're happening, but the mere awareness of why it's happening and knowing around this day in my cycle that I feel like this gives me a little bit more power to be like, I understand and recognize that I'm a little bit stabby, and what's best on these days is to probably avoid as much human interaction as I can. Like, for example, my day fell on Saturday last week and I was on the way to a yoga class and I pulled into the garage and there was a whole football team of girls on the way to a match and they were all queuing up to buy one thing and I had a coffee and I was like, are you fucking for real? Like, could your coach not be like, can you not just let that lady go instead of queuing up behind them all? And I was like, ugh. Then I got to the yoga class and then there was like, the yoga class was packed and there was someone in front of me and beside me and I was just like, ugh. Anyway, did the yoga class, felt way better after it and stuff like that. That was fine. But then I looked at my thing and I was like, ah, yes, that makes sense. Because if that had happened the week before, I would have been in the shop and been like, wow, it's not amazing. Look at all the girls into sport, like young teenagers and stuff like that, doing sport at the weekend. Then I would have got to the yoga class and been like, oh, look at all these people doing yoga on a Saturday morning. Like, that is just magical. That's amazing. But no, when Narissa's in her stabby phase, I'm like, must you breathe so loudly beside me? So I tend to just navigate my schedules and stuff around that and like support that as best as I can. Now I'm lucky enough I work from home, so like I can kind of do that. I understand if you're in the office and have to be around people, maybe just pop your headphones in. Right, so that is the follicular phase, and then we have the luteal phase, and that goes on until bam, day 1 of your cycle starts again, and then we're back in the follicular phase. Right, so we have follicular phase, luteal phase, ovulation in the middle. Right, so we all get that now. We understand what's going on throughout the cycle and the symptoms we may be experiencing. With that in mind, if someone is dieting, right, and I'm going to talk about myself personally, and I want to point out that if I mention any numbers in this video, like calorie targets, this is not me telling you to eat these calories. That is not how this works. I am a person who trains X amount of days. I've trained for this amount of years. I am this level of activity. I am this old. I have this much more. I know my calorie targets in and out if I want to cut. This is not me telling you listening to this that this is what you should be eating, because we are totally different, okay? But if I drop a couple of numbers in here for reference, now you know why I'm saying it. And I've been doing this for years, so that's why I understand what I need to do to cut. So usually if I am doing a cut, what I will do is I will put myself in a slightly bigger calorie deficit for week 1 and 2, okay? And given my activity level and the amount of times a week and training and stuff like that, for me, 1700, 1750 is quite a deficit for me, okay? That's not saying that that is for everyone. I want to point out again, especially if you're someone who's very sedentary and not training that much and dependent on your body weight and stuff like that, that could actually be your maintenance, right? But for me, from studying this for so long, I know if I put myself in about 1700, that's quite a big deficit for me, right? So then after ovulation, what I usually find is, with regards to food, I start getting a little bit hungrier. So I push the calories up a little bit, okay? Not a lot. I still put myself in a deficit, but not as big of a deficit, okay? So maybe then by week 3, if I notice my hunger levels are increasing, I push the calories up 200 a day, right? Now, what's important here is, because people think of daily calorie targets and stuff like that, is I always say to my clients, what's more important is your weekly averages and your monthly averages, because it's your consistency over time. So if you took my monthly average over the course of the month, where I had a big deficit for 2 weeks, a smaller deficit for a week, and then maybe I was at maintenance, or maybe a small deficit for the week 4, I'm still in a deficit over the month when you work out my averages. So if I'm in a calorie deficit over the month, what's going to happen? I'm going to drop body fat, right? But I'm also supporting where I'm at in my cycle, because I actually can't fucking stick to them calories. Like if you gave me 1700 for week 3, it's just not happening, or week 4, depending on my hunger levels at the time. It's just not going to happen. I can't stick to it, and then I'm miserable and I'm angry and I don't want to train. So I'm like, right, support that, bring them up. Doesn't mean that I am creating less of a deficit and the progress will be a little bit slower, yes. And I have clients that can diet consistently 4 weeks of the month and it doesn't bother them. But me personally, this is what works for me. Also, I'm coming from a background of having quite a lot of muscle mass, right? So for me to cut, I can do it in a few weeks to get what I wanted, right? But if I was someone who had a lot of body fat to lose, right, and I wanted to cut, then a more slightly bigger deficit over the course of the month is going to be required. With that in mind, then we talk about training. How can we figure out our training in relation to the menstrual cycle? Right, so if you are doing strength training and you are lifting pretty heavy, what I would normally notice is the first 2 weeks of my cycle, I am smashing it out the park. I am hitting my PBs. I'm able to increase my reps. I'm able to increase my weights. I'm able to do this, that, and the other. My recovery is insane. I could do a really heavy leg session and I'm not too bad the next day, right? So in these first 2 weeks of your cycle, you can increase your training frequency, how many days you're going, okay? You can increase your training load, like how much weight you're actually lifting. You're probably going to be able to whack up your step count because you have more energy and you actually want to do all this, okay? Then after ovulation, we take into account that maybe energy level dips a little bit, recovery is going to dip, strength is going to dip. So maybe for week 3, depending on how you're feeling, maybe you can push it a little bit in week 3. But me personally, I find usually what I'm doing in week 3 is maintaining what I did the week before. Week 4, depending on how I'm feeling, maybe I have to do a deload week. Maybe I have to decrease the amount of times I'm going to the gym. Now, this is not for someone who's training 3 times a week, okay? I don't mean to be bad, but you should be recovering if you're only training 3 times a week and you're spacing your training sessions out. I'm talking about people who are training about 5 times a week, okay? Then you maybe can strip back to 4. Maybe strip back to 3 and incorporate a little bit of yoga or some more grounded movement into your practice, okay? Something that's kind of going to calm the nervous system down a little bit while keeping the blood flowing. Pilates, yoga, swimming, a little bit lower intensity, right? And maybe you do need to do a deload week before your period because your strength is actually shit. Like, I trained on Sunday, I'm doing my period next week. I did legs. I didn't even go that heavy. I just was doing what I was doing before, and I was still sore on Wednesday. Like, my recovery was shit. Now, I'm not going to go into actually how you can like support the menstrual cycle. That is a video for another day, right? And how you can kind of help manage cravings, for want of a better word. This video is already nearly 20 minutes long. Just the main points to consider. Week 1 and 2, days 1 to 14. Superhero week, utilize it, train hard, get your steps up. Maybe you can do a bigger calorie deficit during this time. After ovulation, then you might need to decrease your training a little bit. Maybe you need to do more grounded exercises. Maybe you need to increase your calories a little bit. Know that your body is actually burning more calories throughout the day. The last thing I'll say is it's actually also important to realize, are you actually ovulating? Now, there's a couple of things, I'm not going to go into them, but the main way you can kind of determine whether you ovulate or not is actually by tracking your basal temperature, and your temperature goes up after ovulation, okay? Can you still have a period having not ovulated? Yes, and it's called an ovulatory cycle, okay? So that's another thing to consider, but this video is long enough. If you found this helpful, please share it, okay? Like, I know I keep saying this. If you've watched this till the end and you found it helpful, will you please share it? Because if you found it helpful, maybe someone you know might find it helpful. Because this is one thing that I fucking wish someone told me about when I was younger, because it would have changed my whole approach to how I was treating my body at different stages of the month when I was training or when I was dancing and stuff like that. So if you found it helpful, please give it a share. Let me know in the comments if there's any questions. My DMs are always open. And work with your body, not against it. It is the most empowering thing you can do because your body is a temple and you need to treat it as such.